I'm Iris, 32 years old. 10 years ago, on the rainiest night of the year, my father threw me out of his house with a torn suitcase and $47 in my pocket. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I dared to ask him for what my brother received without question: college tuition. From that night forward, my father told everyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable, that I couldn't hold down a job, that the family had tried everything, but I refused treatment. For 10 years, I stayed silent. For 10 years, I built my career from nothing, while he built an elaborate lie about who I was. Then one day, I was nominated for the biggest award in my industry, broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of viewers. When they called my name and I walked up to that stage, I knew exactly what I was going to say. And my father? He was watching, surrounded by every single person he'd spent a decade lying to. Before I tell you what happened next, if this story resonates with you, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to hear how it ends. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? I'm always curious to know which corners of the world are listening. Now let me take you back to 10 years ago, the night that changed everything. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. I stood on the front porch of my parents' house in Connecticut, my grandmother's old suitcase at my feet, its zipper broken from where I'd stuffed my clothes in too fast. Through the beveled glass of the front door, I could see the chandelier in the foyer, the Waterford crystal one my mother had picked out for their 25th anniversary. It was still glowing warm and golden, but the deadbolt had already clicked into place. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been inside that house, surrounded by 32 members of my extended family, celebrating my grandfather's 80th birthday. 30 minutes earlier, I'd still believed that if I just asked the right way, my father might finally see me as worthy of the same investment he'd made in my brother. I was wrong. Let me rewind 2 hours before I ended up standing in that rain. The party was at Castellano's, my grandfather's favorite Italian restaurant. The kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters who remember your name. My father had rented out the entire back room. 32 place settings. Chianti that cost more per bottle than my weekly grocery budget. A 3-tiered cake from the best bakery in Hartford. I'd driven 4 hours from my apartment near campus to be there. I was 22, in my final semester of undergrad, and I'd just received the letter that was supposed to change my life. Acceptance into one of the top architecture programs in the country. Full curriculum. $45,000 a year. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say to my father for weeks. I'd chosen this moment carefully, surrounded by family, a celebratory atmosphere. I thought he'd be in a good mood. I thought the presence of witnesses might make him more reasonable. I was so naive. I waited until the cake had been cut and coffee was being served. I approached my father quietly, touched his elbow, and asked if we could speak privately for a moment. He turned to look at me, his Rolex catching the light, and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Whatever you need to say it here," he announced, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "We're all family." I should have walked away, but I was 22, and I still believed he might say yes. So I told him about the acceptance, about the program, about how this was my dream, and how I'd worked so hard, and how I was hoping, just hoping, that he might consider helping me the way he'd helped Derek. My brother Derek, 18 years old, was sitting 3 seats away. He'd just gotten a brand new BMW for his birthday. His college tuition, all 4 years of it, had been paid in full before he'd even graduated high school. He'd never had to ask for any of it. My father's expression didn't change. "Help you?" he repeated. "The way I helped Derek?" And then he laughed. What happened next still plays in my mind like a film I can't stop rewatching. My father stood up from his chair and suddenly everyone at the table was looking at us. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my grandfather still holding his coffee cup. My mother, her Hermes scarf perfectly arranged, her eyes fixed on her plate. "You think you're entitled to the same thing as your brother?" My father's voice carried across the entire room. "Derek is my son. He's going to carry on this family's name. He's going to build something. And you?" He gestured at me dismissively. "You're a girl. You're going to get married, take someone else's name, and raise their children. Why would I waste money on a degree you'll never use? I felt my face burning. 32 people were staring at me. Dad, I whispered, can we please talk about this in private? There's nothing to talk about. He was louder now, making sure everyone could hear. You want money? Go earn it yourself. Derek never had to beg for anything because Derek knows his place. You? You don't even know what you are. I looked at Derek. He was staring at his phone, pretending not to hear. I looked at my mother. She was rearranging the napkin in her lap. I looked at my grandfather, hoping, praying he might intervene. He'd always been kind to me. He'd always told me I was smart. He cleared his throat. Howard, he said to my father, let's not ruin the party. That was it. That was all he said. My father leaned down close to my ear. His cologne, Tom Ford, $200 a bottle, made me nauseous. I'll email you my reasons, he whispered, so you understand your place in this family. 3 days later, sitting in a rented room that cost $400 a month, I opened that email. The email was worse than anything he'd said out loud. I still remember every word. I've read it so many times over the past decade that it's burned into my memory like a scar. Iris, you were born a girl. That is reality. You don't have the right to demand what belongs to your brother. Derek is the future of this family. You are just something to be given away to another family. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to apologize for humiliating me in front of everyone. I sat on the thin mattress of my rented room, instant ramen growing cold on the desk beside me, and I read those words over and over. My laptop screen blurred. I realized I was crying. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something stopped me. Some instinct I couldn't name at the time. Instead, I clicked save. I created a folder and named it Evidence. I didn't know what I was saving it for. I just knew I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the things he said were real. A week later, my mother called. She waited until my father was out of the house. I could tell by the way she was whispering, the way she kept pausing to listen for sounds. Iris, honey. Her voice was thick with tears. I love you. You know I love you. And I know what your father did wasn't right. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked. You just sat there, Mom. You didn't say a single word. Silence. You know how your father is, she finally said. If I'd defended you, he would have... I don't have anywhere to go, Iris. I don't have my own money. I don't have... I understand, I said. And I did. I understood that I was completely alone. But my mother did say one thing before she hung up that I didn't fully understand until much later. Iris, she whispered, your father is... He's telling people things. About you. Things that aren't true. I don't know how to stop him. What things? She didn't answer. Just said she loved me and hung up. 2 months later, I found out exactly what she meant. I was studying for finals in my tiny apartment when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Helen, my mother's younger sister. She'd always been warm to me, always snuck me extra dessert at family dinners. Iris, sweetheart, she said, her voice dripping with concern. How are you feeling? Are you getting the help you need? I frowned. Help? What do you mean? Your treatment, honey. Your father told us about your condition. He said you've been struggling since you were young, and that's why you left home. He said the family tried everything, but you refused to get better. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk. Aunt Helen, I don't have a condition. I don't know what he told you, but... Oh, honey. Her voice was soothing, the way you'd talk to a frightened child. It's okay. You don't have to be ashamed. Mental illness is nothing to be embarrassed about. We're all praying for you. I called 3 more relatives that night. They'd all heard the same story. My father had been thorough. My cousin Sarah read me a text message from our family group chat, the one I'd been removed from. My father's words, sent to over 40 people. Please don't contact Iris. She's going through a serious mental health crisis. Any stimulation could make things worse. We've tried everything. Just pray for her. That's when I understood. My father wasn't just punishing me for leaving. He was erasing me. I had 2 choices. I could call every single person he'd lied to. I could scream the truth from the rooftops. I could forward them his email, show them what he'd really said, demand they believe me over him. Or I could stay silent. I spent 3 days thinking about it. 3 days of barely eating, barely sleeping, just pacing my $400 room and running through scenarios in my head. If I fought back now, what would happen? I was 22 years old. I had no money, no credentials, no reputation of my own. My father was Howard Mercer, a successful contractor, a member of 3 different charity boards, a man who'd built relationships in our community for 30 years. He had golf buddies who were judges. He had business partners who were city councilmen. Who would believe me? A mentally unstable girl with nothing to her name, accusing her respectable father of lies? I could already see how that would play out. They'd shake their heads sadly. They'd talk about how tragic it was, how the illness had made me delusional. My father would play the suffering parent, and everyone would comfort him for having such a difficult daughter. I couldn't win that fight. Not yet. So I made a different choice. I opened my laptop. I looked at the folder I'd created, the one labeled Evidence. I moved my father's email into it. Then I went back through my phone and screenshotted every text my aunt had read me, every message from relatives expressing their concern. I saved all of it. I didn't know when I'd use it. I didn't know how. I only knew that someday I would have something he didn't have right now. Proof of who I really was. Not his words, my work. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to scream. The truth would speak for itself. I threw myself into work. I took out federal loans for tuition. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop from 6 to 10 in the morning, another at a design firm's front desk from 6 to 10 at night. In between, I studied. I slept 4 hours on good nights. My grades didn't slip. If anything, they got better. Turns out there's nothing like rage to fuel productivity. It was during my 2nd year that I met Eleanor Vance. She was a guest lecturer that semester, a legendary figure in the architecture world, 70 years old, with a career spanning 5 decades, and awards covering an entire wall of her office. She'd designed museums in 3 countries. She'd been on the cover of every design magazine that mattered. She'd also been one of the first women to break into a field that told her she didn't belong. After one of her lectures, she stopped me as I was packing up my bag. "You're the one who did the Morrison project, aren't you?" she asked. "The adaptive reuse concept?" I nodded, surprised she even knew my name. It was exceptional. She studied me with sharp gray eyes. "Tell me about your background." I hesitated. I'd gotten good at deflecting this question. "My family doesn't support my career," I finally said. "We're not in contact." Most people would have pressed, asked why, offered sympathy, made it awkward. Eleanor just nodded. "My father told me women shouldn't be architects," she said. "He didn't speak to me for 15 years after I enrolled in school." She handed me a business card. "I have a studio in the city. Come intern for me this summer. No pay, but I'll teach you everything I know." I took the card. "Ms. Vance," I said, "thank you. You have no idea what this means." She smiled. "Actually, I think I do." Eleanor didn't just teach me architecture. She taught me patience, strategy, the long game. "Success is the best response to people who doubt you," she told me once, over coffee in her studio. "Not because it proves them wrong, though it does, but because it proves you right to yourself." I carried those words with me through the next 10 years. Year 1 and 2, I graduated with honors. My father didn't attend. I didn't expect him to. Year 3 through 5, I started as a junior designer at a small firm, making barely enough to cover my student loans. But I worked harder than anyone else. I stayed later. I took on projects no one wanted. My first solo design, a boutique cafe renovation, won a local award. Year 6 through 8. Eleanor recommended me to a prestigious studio in Chicago. I moved across the country with 2 suitcases and a folder full of drawings. Within 18 months, I was senior designer. Within 3 years, I was leading my own team. Year 9 and 10, associate director. My name on projects that got published in national magazines, invitations to speak at conferences, a reputation built entirely on my own work. And through all of it, my father never stopped. Every year, he refined his story. Every year he had new details to share with anyone who asked about his daughter. She's unstable. She can't hold a job. The family tried everything. Such a tragedy. I know because people told me. A former business partner of my father's ran into me at an industry event in Chicago once. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "You're Iris Mercer?" he said. "Howard's daughter? But he told me that you couldn't." "Couldn't what?" I asked calmly. He didn't finish the sentence, but I saw the confusion in his eyes, the first crack in my father's carefully constructed narrative. I smiled and handed him my business card. The wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday. I was 29 years old. I'd been living in Chicago for 3 years. I had an apartment with actual furniture that I'd picked out myself, a career I was proud of, and a life completely separate from the family I'd left behind. The envelope was thick cream cardstock, my name written in elegant calligraphy. Inside, a formal invitation to the wedding of Derek Michael Mercer and Amanda Louise Patterson. No personal note. No, "We'd love to see you," or "It's been too long." Just my name on a list, the same as any distant acquaintance. I turned the invitation over. The back listed the wedding party: Howard and Margaret Mercer, parents of the groom. That was it. No mention of a sister. My phone buzzed. My mother's name appeared on the screen. She still called me once every few months, always when my father was out of the house, always with the same mix of love and helplessness. "Did you get the invitation?" she asked before I could even say hello. "I did. Will you come?" Her voice was fragile, hopeful. "Please, Iris. It's been so long. I miss you so much." "Mom," I hesitated. "Does he even want me there?" Silence. Then, "Your father doesn't know Derek sent you an invitation. Derek did it on his own, but I want you there. I need to see my daughter." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Just please, don't do anything to embarrass your father. Don't make a scene. It's Derek's day." I looked at the invitation in my hand. 7 years of silence, and this was my welcome back. "Come to the party, stay invisible, don't cause trouble." "I'll be there," I said. But I wasn't going to stay invisible. I was going to see, with my own eyes, what my father said about me when he thought I wasn't listening. The wedding was held at the Waverly Country Club, the same one where my father had been a member for 25 years. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. White roses cascaded from every surface. A string quartet played Vivaldi as 200 guests mingled with champagne flutes in hand. I wore a simple navy dress, elegant but understated. I wasn't there to draw attention. I was there to observe. My father spotted me the moment I walked in. I saw his eyes flick toward me across the room, register my presence, and then nothing. He turned back to the business associate he was chatting with as if I were a stranger he'd accidentally made eye contact with. For the next 3 hours, he didn't acknowledge me once. I moved through the reception like a ghost. I congratulated Derek and his bride. I hugged my mother, who cried and clutched my hands and whispered, "You look so beautiful," before my father called her name, and she scurried back to his side. I smiled at cousins who looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity, and I listened. I positioned myself near my father's table during cocktail hour, close enough to hear, but far enough not to be noticed. A friend of his, a man I didn't recognize, gestured toward me. "Howard, isn't that your daughter, the one who—" "Ah, yes." My father's voice was practiced, smooth. "She's doing a bit better these days. Still unstable, but we're hopeful. The doctors say with the right medication—" "Such a shame," the friend said. "She seems so normal." "That's the thing about mental illness," my father said gravely. "You can't always tell from the outside." I stood perfectly still, champagne glass in hand, and let his words wash over me. I'd known, intellectually, what he'd been saying, but hearing him lie about me while I was standing 15 feet away, was something else entirely. Then I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned to find Derek. "Iris," he whispered, glancing nervously toward our father. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make him stop." "Do you believe him?" I asked quietly. "What he says about me?" Derek's eyes dropped to the floor. That was answer enough. Near the end of the reception, my mother found me. The cake had been cut, the bouquet had been thrown, and guests were starting to drift toward the exits. I was standing alone near the garden doors, watching the sun set over the golf course, when I felt her hand slip into mine. "Come with me," she whispered. "Quickly." She led me outside, past the rose garden, to a quiet corner of the terrace where no one could see us. Her hands were trembling as she reached into her clutch and pulled out something small and black. A USB drive. "Take this," she said, pressing it into my palm. "Don't let your father know I gave it to you." I stared at it. "What is this?" "Everything," her voice cracked. "Every email he's sent about you, every text message, every lie he's told to his friends, his partners, our relatives. I copied all of it." "Mom." I couldn't process what she was saying. "How do you even have access to—" "I've known his passwords for years. He doesn't know I know." She laughed bitterly. "He thinks I'm too stupid to figure them out. But I've been watching, Iris. For 10 years, I've been watching what he does to your name, and I—" Her voice broke. "I couldn't stop him. I was too scared. But I could do this." I looked down at the small piece of plastic in my hand. 10 years of lies. 10 years of systematic destruction of my reputation. All documented. "Why now?" I asked. My mother's eyes were wet. "Because I saw his face when you walked in today. He didn't even look at you. His own daughter. And I thought—" She wiped her cheek. "I thought maybe someday you'll be able to use this, to make people see the truth, even if I can't." I hugged her tighter than I had in years. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. "You have no idea what this means." I didn't open the USB drive until I was back in Chicago 3 days later. I told myself I needed time to prepare. In reality, I was terrified of what I'd find. It was a Sunday night. I poured myself a glass of wine I didn't drink, sat down at my desk, and plugged the drive into my laptop. There were over 50 files, emails, screenshots of text messages, chat logs from the family group that had removed me a decade ago, all organized by date, starting from 2 months after I'd left home. I read them one by one, and with each one, the knife twisted deeper. "Iris is having another episode. Please don't try to contact her directly. It only makes things worse. We've consulted 3 different specialists. They all say the same thing. She refuses treatment. It breaks my heart to say this, but my daughter cannot function in normal society. We've tried everything." And then I found one that made me stop breathing. It was an email sent 5 years ago to a man named Robert Chen. I recognized the name. He was a real estate developer my father had worked with, someone who'd approached me about a major project early in my career. I'd been so excited. It would have been my first big break. The contract had fallen through at the last minute. Robert had said there were budget concerns, and they'd decided to go in a different direction. My father's email to him read, "Robert, I know you're considering hiring my daughter for the Parkview project. I'm telling you this as a friend. Don't. She's not stable. She has serious mental health issues that she refuses to address. If you bring her onto this project, you will regret it. I'm saying this because I care about you and don't want to see your reputation damaged." I closed my laptop and cried until I couldn't breathe. He hadn't just been lying about me. He'd been actively sabotaging my career. A week later, I met Eleanor for lunch. I hadn't told anyone what I'd found on the USB drive. I'd been carrying it around like a grenade, unsure what to do with it. But Eleanor had been the one constant in my professional life for nearly a decade. If anyone could give me perspective, it was her. We sat at her favorite restaurant, a quiet place overlooking Lake Michigan, where the maitre d' knew her by name. I told her everything. The wedding, the lies, the sabotaged project. 10 years of systematic destruction that I'd only now fully understood. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her wineglass and looked at me with those sharp gray eyes that had seen everything the industry could throw at a woman. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to send everything to every person he's ever lied to. Part of me wants to call him and scream until my throat bleeds. And part of me is so tired of him taking up space in my head." Eleanor nodded slowly. "When I won my first major award," she said, "my father didn't come. He told everyone I'd bought my way onto the jury. He said the only reason a woman could win was if she'd slept her way to the top. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I could have fought him publicly, made a scene, demanded he retract his lies. What did you do instead? I kept winning. She leaned forward. Iris, the truth doesn't need you to scream it. The truth just needs you to live it. And if you do that well enough, eventually you'll have a stage big enough for everyone to hear. She paused, then added, speaking of which, you're on the shortlist for the IIDA award this year. I'm on the selection committee. I saw your project. My heart stopped. The IIDA? The ceremony is broadcast live, she said. Hundreds of thousands of viewers. She raised her glass. I think your stage might be coming sooner than you think. 6 months later, the email arrived. I was in my office, reviewing floor plans for a boutique hotel in Miami, when my inbox pinged. The subject line made me read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. IID, a Design Excellence Award, official nomination. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Ms. Mercer, we are pleased to inform you that you have been nominated for the Interior Design Association's Award for Design Excellence in recognition of your work on the Meridian Hotel Collection. The award ceremony will take place on March 15th at the Grand Hyatt, New York, and will be broadcast live via television and online streaming platforms. I read the rest of the email in a daze. The Meridian Project, 4 boutique hotels across the Midwest, each one designed to reflect the unique character of its city. 2 years of my life, countless sleepless nights, a team of brilliant people who'd trusted my vision. And now, this. I called Eleanor immediately. I just got the email, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm nominated. I know. I could hear her smiling through the phone. I told you, your stage is coming. Eleanor, I don't know if I can. You can, she interrupted gently. And Iris? If you win, I'll be the one introducing you on stage. That's already been arranged. I hung up and sat in my chair for a long time, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. The ceremony would be broadcast live, hundreds of thousands of people watching, industry leaders, journalists, everyone who mattered in my field. I thought about the USB drive in my desk drawer, about the emails I'd never responded to, about my father, probably sitting in his country club right now, telling someone new that his daughter was too unstable to hold down a job. For the first time, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just needed to wait for the right moment. 1 week before the ceremony, I was in my apartment, standing in front of a full-length mirror, wearing the dress. It was emerald green, custom-made by a designer friend who'd owed me a favor. Off the shoulder, beaded along the neckline, the kind of dress that made you feel like you could conquer the world. I'd paired it with red-soled Louboutins that I'd saved 3 months to afford. I had 2 speeches prepared. One was standard, grateful, professional, humble. The kind of speech you'd expect from any award winner. The other was different. My phone buzzed. Derek's name appeared on the screen. I frowned. He hadn't texted me in almost a year. Iris, I just found out you're nominated for a big award. Congratulations. That's amazing. I was about to type a simple thank you when another message came through. I need to tell you something. Dad is hosting a watch party for the ceremony at the house. He invited all his business friends and golf buddies. He doesn't know you're nominated. None of them do. I stared at the screen. Why is he watching an interior design awards ceremony? I typed back. One of his clients sponsored it. He thinks it'll be good networking to discuss it with them. Iris, he's going to be watching live, with everyone he's spent 10 years lying to about you. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed. All of them. Every person he'd told that I was mentally unstable. Every friend he'd convinced that I couldn't function in society. They'd all be sitting in his living room, watching television together, when my name was called. If I won, if I chose to use that stage the way I'd been thinking about using it. One more message from Derek. Whatever you're going to do, I think it's time. I didn't reply. I just looked at myself in the mirror, the dress, the shoes, the woman I'd built myself into over 10 years of silence, and I smiled. This is the point where I want to pause for a moment. If you've been following along this far, You've walked with me through 10 years of silence. Thank you for that. Before I tell you what happened when I stepped onto that stage, I'm curious. What would you say if you were in my position? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd genuinely love to know how you'd handle this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now might be the time. Because what comes next, you won't want to miss. The Grand Hyatt Ballroom was even more spectacular than I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from 40-foot ceilings. Tables draped in white linen stretched across the room, each one filled with the most influential people in my industry. 500 guests in total. Designers, architects, executives, journalists. And beyond this room, hundreds of thousands more watching from their living rooms, their offices, their phones. Including my father. I stood backstage, my emerald dress catching the light every time I moved. Through a gap in the curtain, I could see the stage, a massive screen displaying the IIDA logo, a sleek podium where winners would accept their awards, and row after row of expectant faces. Nervous? I turned. Eleanor was beside me, resplendent in silver that matched her hair. Terrified, I admitted. She took my hand. Remember what I told you years ago? The truth doesn't need you to scream. It just needs you to live it. She squeezed my fingers. Whatever you decide to say up there, Iris, I'm proud of you. Not because of this award. Because of who you've become. I hugged her, carefully so as not to wrinkle either of our dresses. A producer with a headset approached us. Ms. Mercer, you're one of the favorites tonight. Be ready. The Design Excellence category is up in 15 minutes. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. When he walked away, Eleanor leaned close. I've known about your father for years, she said quietly. I never said anything because it wasn't my story to tell. But I want you to know, whatever you say on that stage, I'll be standing right behind you. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The ceremony was beginning. I touched the folded paper in my clutch. The speech I'd written at 3 a.m, the words I'd waited a decade to say. It was almost time. And now, the award for Design Excellence in Commercial Interior Design. I watched from backstage as the presenter, a famous architect whose work I'd admired for years, approached the podium with a gold envelope in his hand. This year's nominees represent the very best our industry has to offer. Their work pushes boundaries, challenges conventions, and transforms spaces into experiences. He read off the nominees. 4 names. Mine was last. And the winner is... The room went silent. 500 people held their breath. Somewhere in Connecticut, my father was probably on his second scotch, making small talk with business partners about networking opportunities, completely unaware that his daughter's name was about to fill the screen. The presenter opened the envelope, smiled. Iris Mercer, for the Meridian Hotel Collection. The ballroom erupted. I don't remember the first few seconds. Just noise, applause, music, Eleanor's hands pushing me gently forward. Then I was walking. 1 foot in front of the other, emerald silk swishing against my legs, the spotlight following me like a living thing. I climbed the stairs to the stage. The presenter handed me the award, a sculpture of crystal and silver, heavier than I expected. I stepped to the podium, looked out at 500 faces, all watching me, all waiting, and somewhere, through cameras and cables and satellites, my father was watching too. I could picture it perfectly. His living room, the big screen TV, 6 or 7 men in polo shirts and khakis, drinks in hand. My father in his favorite armchair, probably mid-sentence about some construction deal, and then my face appearing on the screen. I imagined the exact moment he'd realize. The blood draining from his face, the glass frozen halfway to his lips, his friends turning to look at him. Isn't that your daughter, Howard? The one you said was mentally unstable? I gripped the podium, looked directly into the camera, and I began to speak. Thank you to the IIDA. Thank you to my incredible team who brought this vision to life. And thank you to my mentor, Eleanor Vance, who believed in me when I had nothing. I paused, let the applause die down. But there's something else I need to say. The ballroom went completely still. 500 people stared up at me. The red light on the camera blinked steadily. Hundreds of thousands more were watching from their homes, their phones, their offices. I took a breath. I want to thank everyone who believed in me over the past 10 years, I said. Everyone who gave me a chance. Everyone who looked at my work and saw potential instead of making assumptions about who I was. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded paper. I want to thank all of you, because my own father spent those same 10 years telling everyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable, that I couldn't hold down a job, that I was a burden to my family who refused treatment. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw confused glances, raised eyebrows. I kept going. For 10 years, I stayed silent. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. I knew I needed proof. Proof that he was wrong about me. Proof that I was capable of building a life on my own terms. I unfolded the paper. This is an email my father sent me 10 years ago, when I asked him to help pay for my education, the same education he'd already fully funded for my brother. I want to read it to you exactly as he wrote it. The ballroom was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Iris, you were born a girl. That is reality. You don't have the right to demand what belongs to your brother. Derek is the future of this family. You are just something to be given away to another family. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to apologize for humiliating me in front of everyone. I folded the paper and looked up. I didn't apologize. I left. And from that day forward, my father told everyone I was mentally ill to explain why his daughter had disappeared from his life. I looked directly into the camera. Dad, if you're watching, and I know you are, this is my answer. I'm not unstable. I'm not broken. I'm not a burden. I'm standing on this stage because I earned it. And the only thing wrong with me was that I was born a girl in a family that believed girls weren't worth investing in. I held up the crystal award. This isn't revenge. This is just the truth, and the truth doesn't need me to scream. It just needed me to live it. The first person to stand was Eleanor, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet, applause thundering through the room. And somewhere in Connecticut, I knew my father's phone was starting to ring. I don't remember walking off the stage. I remember Eleanor catching me the moment I stepped behind the curtain, her arms wrapping around me so tightly I could barely breathe. I remember her saying, "You did it. You did it, Iris," over and over. I remember my phone, silenced for the ceremony, lighting up with notification after notification after notification, messages flooding in so fast the screen couldn't keep up. I remember a producer approaching us with wide eyes. "Ms. Mercer, the clip is already going viral. We're getting inquiries from news outlets. Do you want to—" "No interviews," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. What I said on stage is everything I have to say. I don't want to talk about my father anymore. I want to talk about my work. The producer nodded and disappeared. Back in the ballroom, I could hear the ceremony continuing, the next category being announced, polite applause. But the energy had shifted. People kept glancing toward the backstage area. Phones were out everywhere, screens glowing blue in the dim light. Within 30 minutes, the clip had 100,000 views. Eleanor showed me on her tablet, scrolling through the comments. Thousands of people sharing their own stories. Thousands more tagging friends and family. The hashtag Iris Mercer was climbing the trending charts. "You should see what's happening on Twitter," someone from my team said, breathless. "It's everywhere." But I wasn't thinking about Twitter. I was thinking about a living room in Connecticut. About a man in an armchair surrounded by his golf buddies and business partners, the same people he'd spent a decade lying to about his mentally unstable daughter. I imagined Richard Calloway turning to my father with confusion on his face. "Howard, that's your daughter? The one you said couldn't hold down a job? She just won the biggest award in her industry." I imagined my father's phone ringing, and ringing, and ringing. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't the one who needed to explain herself. 48 hours later, the video had 3 million views. I watched the number climb from my apartment in Chicago, curtains drawn, phone on silent. Every news outlet in the country wanted an interview. Every morning show wanted me on their couch. My inbox was so flooded that my assistant had to create a separate folder just to manage the media requests. I said no to all of them. "The speech said everything I needed to say," I told my publicist. "I don't want to become known for my family drama. I want to be known for my work. The articles wrote themselves anyway. Award-winning designer exposes father's decade of lies on live TV. Iris Mercer's acceptance speech goes viral. The truth doesn't need me to scream. The email that started it all, inside one woman's 10-year journey to justice. The comments sections were overwhelming. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of being dismissed, diminished, disbelieved by their families. Thousands more tagging their own fathers, their own mothers, their own siblings who'd said they'd never amount to anything. I'd become a symbol of something I hadn't intended to represent. On the second day, I started getting messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Relatives who'd cut me off, family friends who'd believed my father's lies, former colleagues who'd been warned to stay away from me. The apologies came in waves. Iris, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I should have questioned what Howard told me. I feel terrible. All these years I thought you were struggling. I should have reached out. I never should have believed him. Can you ever forgive me? I read every single one. I didn't respond to most of them. But one message stood out. From an email address I'd almost forgotten. Robert Chen, the developer who'd pulled the contract 5 years ago. The one my father had sabotaged. Iris, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation and a conversation, if you're willing. I stared at his message for a long time. Then I wrote back. I'm listening. I didn't witness what happened at the country club. Derek told me about it later. 1 week after the ceremony, Richard Calloway, my father's closest friend of 20 years, requested a meeting. Not at my father's office, not at his home, at the Waverly Country Club, in the private dining room where deals were made and reputations were either built or destroyed. 4 men were waiting when my father arrived. Richard, James Monroe, David Foster, Tom Patterson, Amanda's father, now my brother's father-in-law. All of them had been at the watch party the night my speech aired. All of them had spent years hearing my father's stories about his tragic mentally ill daughter. Sit down, Howard, Richard said. His voice was cold. My father sat. According to Derek, who heard about it from Richard himself, my father tried to control the narrative from the first moment. Before you say anything, my father said, you need to understand. That speech was taken out of context. The email she read was from a very difficult time. She's twisting everything to Howard. Richard held up his phone. On the screen was a screenshot of a text message. You sent me this 3 years ago. I'm going to read it to you. Don't bother with Iris. She's unstable, can't keep a job, and the family has tried everything. Just pray for her. My father's face went pale. And this one, Richard continued, swiping to another screenshot. You sent to the entire group chat after she left. Please don't contact Iris directly. She's in a fragile mental state and any stimulation could set her off. We've consulted specialists. It's very serious. You lied to us, David Foster said quietly. For 10 years. She was on live television, Howard, Tom Patterson added. I watched her accept that award. She's not mentally ill. She's accomplished, successful. Everything you said was the opposite of true. Why would you do that to your own daughter? My father, Derek said, had no answer. For the first time in his life, Howard Mercer had nothing to say. The meeting ended with handshakes and tight smiles, but the message was clear. The men who had trusted him for decades now saw him differently. And that was just the beginning. My mother called me on a Sunday morning, 2 weeks after the ceremony. I was sitting on my couch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over Lake Michigan. My phone rang with her name on the screen. But something was different. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't waiting for my father to leave. Iris, she said when I answered. I watched your speech. I know, Mom. I watched it 17 times. Her voice cracked. I watched you stand up there and tell the truth that I was too afraid to tell for 35 years. And I am so, so proud of you. I felt tears prick my eyes. Mom. Your father hasn't spoken to me in a week, she continued. He blamed me, of course. Said I must have given you those emails, must have helped you plan this whole thing. He screamed at me for 3 hours straight the night after it happened. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm more than okay. And for the first time, I heard something new in my mother's voice, something I'd never heard before. Strength. "I've contacted a lawyer," she said. "I'm filing for legal separation. After 36 years, I'm finally doing what I should have done when he kicked you out of this house." Mom, I couldn't find words. "I know it's too late to fix what happened to you. I know I failed you as a mother, but I'm 59 years old, and I just realized I've never made a single decision for myself in my entire adult life. I'm not going to die like this, Iris. I'm not going to let the last chapter of my story be about being too afraid to leave." We were both crying by then. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," I whispered. "I'm starting therapy next week," she said. "First time ever, and I got a part-time job at a gallery downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's mine." "It's yours," I repeated. "That's what matters." Derek and I had our first real conversation a month after the ceremony. Not a text message, not a brief exchange at a family event where he was too nervous to say more than a few words. An actual conversation, face-to-face, over video call. He looked older than I remembered, tired. But his eyes were clearer somehow, like he'd stopped hiding from something. "I need to say something," he started, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond." I nodded. "I knew what Dad was saying about you was wrong. I've known for years. I heard him tell those stories at dinner parties, at golf outings, to anyone who asked about you, and I never said a word." He took a shaky breath. "Because saying something would have meant admitting that I benefited from your suffering, that everything I had, the tuition, the car, the easy path, came at your expense. I didn't want to face that." "Derek, let me finish." His voice cracked. "I was a coward, Iris. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. I can't undo the past decade. I can't give you back the years you struggled alone. But I can promise you that I'm going to be better. Not just in words, in actions." I sat with that for a moment. "I appreciate you saying that," I finally said. "But you're right, words aren't enough. I need to see what better looks like before I can trust it." "I understand." He paused. "I've started seeing a therapist, for the first time in my life. She's helping me understand that Dad didn't just hurt you. He hurt me too, in different ways. The pressure to be perfect, the conditional love, the way I was taught that my worth depended on being the good child. That doesn't excuse what you didn't do." "No, it doesn't." He met my eyes through the screen. "But it helps me understand why I was so afraid to do it." I nodded slowly. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. "One more thing," Derek said. "Amanda's pregnant. We're having a girl." He swallowed hard. "I'm going to make sure she never, ever feels the way Dad made you feel. That's a promise I'm making to myself. And to you." 1 month after the ceremony, an email from my father appeared in my inbox. I stared at the sender's name for a long time before I opened it. Howard Mercer. The first direct communication from him in 10 years, since the email I'd read on national television. I clicked. "Iris, what you did at that award ceremony was a betrayal of this family that I will never forgive. You took private matters and displayed them for the entire world to see, purely to humiliate me. You have damaged my reputation, my business relationships, and the Mercer family name. A name that I built over 40 years of hard work. I don't know who put you up to this, or what you hope to gain. But you need to understand. Everything I said about you was for your own protection. I was trying to manage a difficult situation in the best way I knew how. The fact that you've twisted that into some kind of public revenge fantasy tells me that you are still as unstable as you've always been. I expect a public retraction. I expect you to make a statement clarifying that you exaggerated and took my words out of context. If you do this, we can discuss moving forward as a family. Your father, Howard Mercer, CEO, Mercer Construction." I read it twice. Then I wrote my response. "Dad, this is the last email I will ever send you. I didn't humiliate you. You spent 10 years humiliating yourself by lying about your own daughter. I simply told the truth. If the truth embarrasses you, that's not my problem to solve. I will not be issuing a retraction because there is nothing to retract. Every word I said was accurate. I have the receipts to prove it. You had 10 years to apologize. You had 10 years to call me, reach out, admit that what you did was wrong. Instead, you doubled down on the lie every single time. I don't hate you. I don't wish you harm. But I also don't owe you anything. Not an explanation, not a retraction, and certainly not my silence. This chapter is closed. Please don't contact me again. Iris. I hit send. Then I blocked his email address, his phone number, and every other way he might try to reach me. Derek told me later that my father forwarded my response to several friends, accompanied by his own commentary about how unhinged I still was. But this time, no one agreed with him. The truth had spoken, and it didn't need me anymore. I know a lot of you are waiting to see if my father ever apologized. I used to wait for that too. I spent years believing that if he would just say sorry, I could finally heal. But I learned something important. My healing was never dependent on his apology. It couldn't be. Because some people will never admit they were wrong, and I couldn't put my peace in their hands. If you're waiting for someone to change before you let yourself move on, I hope this part of my story gives you permission to stop waiting. And if this resonates, share it with someone who needs to hear it. 3 months after the ceremony, I took stock of what had changed. The numbers were concrete now, measurable. The kind of consequences that couldn't be explained away or spun into another narrative. 2 major contracts had quietly dissolved for Mercer Construction. Partners who had worked with my father for over a decade suddenly found reasons to explore other options. The combined value, according to industry estimates, was somewhere around $850,000. The charitable organization where my father had sat on the board for 15 years released a carefully worded press statement about restructuring their leadership. His name was notably absent from the new board list. The Waverly Country Club, his second home for 25 years, still technically allowed him membership. But Derek told me my father had stopped going. The atmosphere had changed, he said. Old friends crossed to the other side of the dining room when they saw him coming. Golf invitations stopped arriving. And at Mercer Construction itself, something subtle but significant had shifted. The board of directors, people who had trusted my father's judgment implicitly for decades, began routing major decisions through Derek instead. My father was still technically CEO, but he was being slowly, quietly, pushed to the margins. None of this was because of legal action or formal consequences. It was simply what happened when a community discovered that one of their most respected members had been lying about his own daughter for a decade. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild easily. I didn't celebrate these developments. I didn't feel vindicated watching my father's world shrink. Mostly, I felt tired. Tired of a story I'd never wanted to be part of in the first place. I'd spent 10 years building a career to prove I wasn't what he said I was. Now I wanted to spend the rest of my life just being myself. The award sat on a shelf in my office. I rarely looked at it. The speech had served its purpose. It was time to move on. 1 year later, I became a partner at the firm. The promotion came not because of the viral speech or the media attention, both of which I'd worked hard to distance myself from, but because of the work I'd done in the 12 months since. 3 new hotel projects. A renovation of a historic theater that made the cover of Architectural Digest. A reputation built on talent, not trauma. My new office had a view of Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows. My name etched on the glass door. Iris Mercer, partner. On my first day in that office, I hung 2 things on the wall. The first was the IIDA award. Not prominently, just on a shelf near the window where the light caught the crystal. The second was a small painting Eleanor had given me when she retired the month before. It was a watercolor of Chicago's skyline at sunset. On the back she'd written, "For Iris, who walked the whole way on her own 2 feet. With love, Eleanor." I'd started a mentorship program for young designers from difficult backgrounds. Once a month, I met with students who were working their way through school the way I had, scholarships and loans and part-time jobs, families that didn't support them, dreams they were told were too big. You don't have to come from the right family to build the right career, I told them. You just have to be willing to outwork everyone who doubted you. I didn't talk about my father in these sessions. I didn't tell them my story. I just showed them what was possible. The interview requests still came occasionally. Book deals, podcast appearances. Tell us about the speech that went viral. I declined them all. I'm not interested in being famous for my family's failures, I told my publicist. I want to be known for my own success. She understood. Everyone did, eventually. Iris Mercer, partner, designer, mentor. Not Iris Mercer, the woman who called out her father on live television. That was the victory I'd really been working toward all along. I visited my mother for the first time since leaving home on a warm Saturday in September. Her new apartment was nothing like the house I'd grown up in. No crystal chandeliers, no imported furniture, no evidence of my father anywhere. It was small, just one bedroom, a galley kitchen, a living room with windows that looked out onto a quiet street. But it was hers. Really, truly hers. I decorated it myself, she said, a little nervously, as she showed me around. I know it's not much, but it's beautiful, Mom. And it was. Plants everywhere, pothos trailing down bookshelves, a fiddle leaf fig in the corner, succulents lining the windowsills, art on the walls that she'd picked out, not my father, photographs in frames, including one of me at my college graduation, an event my father had refused to attend. I started that part-time job at the gallery I told you about, she said, pouring us both tea. It's not much money, but the owner is teaching me about art history. I never knew I'd enjoy learning so much at my age. It's never too late to start, I said. She smiled. A real smile, not the strained, performative one I'd seen for years at family dinners. My therapist says the same thing. Did I tell you I'm in therapy now? First time in my life. You mentioned it. How is it? Hard. She wrapped her hands around her teacup. I'm learning that I spent 36 years being afraid. Afraid of your father, afraid of conflict, afraid of being alone. I'm 59 years old, and I'm just now figuring out who I am. I reached across the table and took her hand. That's not a failure, Mom. That's brave. Her eyes filled with tears. I should have been brave for you, Iris. When you were 22 and he threw you out, I should have... You're being brave now, I said gently. That's what matters. We sat together in her small, warm apartment, drinking tea and talking about nothing important. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had a mother again. I haven't spoken to my father since I sent that final email. Through Derek, I hear fragments of his life now. The picture isn't pretty. He still tells anyone who will listen that I betrayed him, that I was manipulated, that the email was taken out of context, that he was a good father who did everything right, and his ungrateful daughter destroyed his reputation for no reason. Fewer and fewer people listen. His circle has shrunk to a handful of acquaintances who either don't know the full story or don't care. The business partners who once sought his opinion now route their calls through Derek. The country club friends who once laughed at his jokes now remember prior engagements when he suggests getting together. My mother left him. His daughter doesn't speak to him. His son maintains a careful professional distance. By any measure, Howard Mercer is a diminished man. I don't feel happy about this. I don't feel vindicated. I don't feel much of anything, really. I spent so many years wanting him to acknowledge what he did, to apologize, to change. I've had to accept that none of that is coming. Some people never admit they were wrong. Some people go to their graves believing their own lies. My father, I think, will be one of those people. But here's what I've learned. My peace doesn't depend on his transformation. My healing doesn't require his apology. I wasted too many years waiting for him to become someone he's not. I've stopped waiting now. I hope, somewhere deep down, he finds his own peace someday. But whether he does or doesn't, it's no longer my concern. I have a life to live, and it's a good one. Derek and I see each other once a month now. He flies to Chicago for business, and we have dinner at a quiet restaurant near my apartment. We don't talk about our father much. We talk about work, about life, about the future. Mostly, we talk about his daughter. She was born 7 months after the ceremony, a baby girl with Derek's eyes and Amanda's stubborn chin. He named her Grace. I think about what you said a lot, Derek told me one evening, showing me photos on his phone. Grace in a onesie, Grace in a stroller, Grace sleeping in his arms with her tiny fist wrapped around his finger. What I said about what? About being better. About showing it through actions, not words. He swiped to another photo. Every time I hold her, I think about how Dad made you feel growing up, how he made you believe you were less than because you were a girl. And I promised myself I will never, ever do that to her. That's a good promise. I'm going to keep it. He looked up at me. I'm not doing it to earn your forgiveness, Iris. I know that might never come, and I understand why. I'm doing it because it's right, because I don't want to be the person I was. I looked at my little brother, not so little anymore, a father himself now, trying to break a cycle that had wounded both of us in different ways. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. We don't have the relationship we might have had if things had been different. Too much time has passed, too much damage has been done, but we have something. It's not perfect, it's not what it could have been, but it's ours. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I stand at the window of my office and watch the sun set over Chicago. The skyline turns gold, then orange, then deep purple. The lake reflects the light like a mirror. On my shelf, the IIDA award catches the last rays of daylight, crystal glinting. On the wall behind me, Eleanor's painting. On my desk, a photograph of my mentees from last year's cohort, 12 young designers who are now building careers of their own. And somewhere in my memory, always, a 22-year-old girl standing in the rain with a torn suitcase and $47 in her pocket. I don't hate that girl anymore. For years I was ashamed of her, ashamed that she'd needed help, ashamed that she'd asked, ashamed that she'd been rejected so brutally. But now I understand. She survived, she endured. She built something from nothing. She became me. My father said I was worthless. He said I would never amount to anything. He said that being born a girl made me less valuable than my brother, less worthy of investment, less deserving of support. He was wrong. Not because I proved him wrong, though I did, but because he was wrong from the beginning. I was always worthy. I was always enough. The only thing that changed was that I finally believed it. If you're listening to this story and you recognize any part of it, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever been lied about by people who were supposed to love you, if you've ever wondered whether you should keep fighting, I want you to know something. Your worth is not determined by people who refuse to see it. Your healing does not depend on apologies that may never come. And your success is not about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. That's what I learned. That's what I hope you take away from this. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more, and leave me a comment. Tell me your story. I'm always listening. I'll see you in the next one. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have a billionaire father? Trust me, it's not the fairy tale you're imagining. My dad is one of the most powerful real estate moguls in New York City. He owns half of Manhattan. He dines with senators. And he believes, truly believes, that money makes him God. He planned my entire life before I could even walk. Which schools, which friends, which career, which husband. When I was 16, he told me, "Love is a luxury for poor people. You're an Ashford. You marry for strategy." 6 months ago, I broke his rules. I fell in love with a man he called Trash from Queens, a mechanic with grease under his fingernails. And at my own wedding, in front of 300 guests, my father stood up and disowned me. What he didn't know? That Trash was about to become his biggest regret. Hey everyone! I'm Fiona, 28 years old. If you're watching, hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 8 months ago, to the night I told my father I was marrying a man he'd never met. The Ashford penthouse on the Upper East Side had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked down on Central Park like it owned it, which, in a way, my father believed he did. That Thursday evening, we sat around the 12-seat walnut dining table, imported from Italy, my mother reminded guests at every dinner party. The Hermès place settings gleamed under the chandelier. A bottle of 2010 Chateau Margaux breathed on the sideboard, probably worth more than most people's monthly rent. My father, Richard Ashford, sat at the head of the table, his Patek Philippe catching the light every time he raised his wine glass. At 58, he commanded every room he entered. Real estate empire, political connections, a name that opened doors across Manhattan. "I've arranged a meeting for you this Saturday," he said, not looking up from his filet mignon. "Harrison Wells III. His father and I are finalizing the merger. It would be Beneficial for you two to get acquainted. I set down my fork. I can't make Saturday. Now he looked up. I have someone I want you to meet, I continued, my heart hammering against my ribs. Someone I've been seeing for 6 months. His name is James, and I— Who? My father's voice cut through the room like a blade. What family? Wells? Montgomery? Don't tell me it's one of the Hartley boys. You don't know him. The silence that followed was suffocating. You've been seeing someone for 6 months, he said slowly. That I haven't vetted? That I haven't approved? I don't need your approval to date someone, Dad. He leaned back, his jaw tight. In this family, Fiona, love is a luxury. Marriage is strategy. Who is this person who dared approach my daughter without going through me first? I met James 6 months earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon I was never supposed to have free. I'd escaped a particularly brutal board meeting where my father had criticized my marketing proposal in front of the entire executive team. Adequate, he'd called it. Acceptable for someone still learning. I was 27 with an MBA from Columbia, but in his eyes I was perpetually a child playing dress-up. I found a coffee shop in Brooklyn, the kind with mismatched wooden chairs, a menu written in chalk, and not a single person who recognized the Ashford name. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner, trying to remember how to breathe. Rough day? I looked up. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with kind brown eyes and calloused hands. He wore a faded flannel shirt with oil stains on the sleeves. His smile was warm, unpolished, real. That obvious? I asked. You've been stirring that coffee for 10 minutes without drinking it. He sat across from me uninvited, and somehow I didn't mind. We talked for 3 hours. He told me he was a mechanic, owned a small auto repair shop in Queens. He asked about my day, my interests, my dreams. Not once did he ask about my family or what my father did. I don't care what your last name is, he said later, walking me to the subway. I just want to know what makes you laugh. No one had ever said that to me before. He always paid in cash, thick folds of bills he pulled from a worn leather wallet. He refused to go anywhere too fancy, preferring diners and hole-in-the-wall restaurants where the food was good and pretense was absent. I thought he was being careful with money. I had no idea what he was really hiding. My father didn't wait long. 3 days after I mentioned James's name, I was summoned to his office at Ashford Properties headquarters. The corner suite on the 42nd floor, with its $15 million Basquiat on the wall and its view of the entire financial district, was designed to intimidate. It worked on most people. A manila folder sat on his desk. James Carter, my father read aloud, flipping through pages. Age 32. Owns a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, assessed value under $400,000. Operates a small automotive repair shop, Carter's Custom Garage, with estimated annual revenue under $200,000. No significant assets, no family connections of note, no investments beyond a basic retirement account. He closed the folder and looked at me with something between pity and disgust. This is who you've chosen? A grease monkey from Queens? He's a good man. Good men don't build empires, Fiona. Good men get swallowed by them. He stood, walking to the window. I had the best private investigator in the city dig into this. James Carter. Do you know what he found? Nothing. No debts, no scandals, no skeletons. Just nothing. A completely unremarkable man. Maybe that's exactly what I want. He turned, his eyes cold. You're in Ashford. You don't get to be unremarkable. He doesn't want anything from me, Dad. He doesn't care about the money or the name or any of it. That's what you can't understand. My father laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Everyone wants something. The only question is when they reveal it. He slid the folder across the desk. End this, now, before you embarrass this family further. I left the folder on his desk and walked out without another word. His investigator found nothing suspicious because James had been careful, very, very careful. James proposed on a Sunday morning. We were in his Queens apartment, small but spotless, filled with morning light streaming through windows he'd cleaned himself. He made me pancakes, burned slightly at the edges, and handed me a velvet box across the kitchen counter. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, a diamond on a gold band that caught the light like a tiny star. "I know I'm not what your family expected," he said quietly. "I know I can't give you penthouses or private jets, but I can give you this. I will never try to control you. I will never make you feel small, and I will spend every day trying to make you happy." I said yes before he finished speaking. That night, I called my mother. 2 months, I told her. "We're getting married in 2 months. I wanted you to hear it from me first." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "You're killing me, Fiona." Her voice cracked with practiced pain. "You're absolutely killing me. Do you know what this will do to your father, to our reputation?" "I'm getting married, Mom, to someone I love." "Love?" She spat the word like poison. "You think love pays for your lifestyle? Love maintains your social standing?" My brother Derek texted me an hour later. "Heard you're marrying some broke mechanic. Bold move, sis. Can't wait to see you slumming it in Queens." I didn't respond. My father's call came last. His voice was ice. "You want a wedding? Fine. I'll give you a wedding." A pause. "One you'll remember for the rest of your life." I should have heard the threat in his words, but I was too happy to notice the knife being sharpened behind them. The first strike came at Kleinfeld Bridal. I'd scheduled an appointment to try on wedding dresses, nothing extravagant by Ashford standards, just a classic Vera Wang I'd had my eye on. The consultant, a woman who'd served my mother for years, greeted me with a tight smile. "I'm so sorry, Miss Ashford, but there seems to be an issue with your account." My credit card declined, then the backup, then the emergency card my mother had given me for special occasions. I called the bank from the fitting room floor, surrounded by tulle and silk I suddenly couldn't afford. "I apologize, Miss Ashford, but your accounts have been deactivated. The primary account holder removed your authorized user status yesterday." The primary account holder, my father. I sat there in my slip, staring at my phone, as the reality settled over me like a shroud. He hadn't just threatened. He'd started a financial siege. James found me an hour later, still sitting in the fitting room. I'd texted him through tears I refused to let fall in public. "Let me help," he said, reaching for his wallet. "No." Pride made the word sharper than I intended. "I can't. I need to figure this out myself." But he pulled out a stack of cash anyway. $100 bills, at least $2,000, held together with a simple rubber band. More money than any mechanic should casually carry. "I want to," he said simply. "Let me." I looked at that stack of bills. Too thick, too casual. And something flickered in the back of my mind. But I was too overwhelmed to examine it closely. For the first time in 28 years, I stood in a store I couldn't afford. And I realized something terrifying. Without my father's money, I didn't know who I was. But I was about to find out. The social fallout was swift and surgical. Within a week, my phone went quiet. Friends I'd known since prep school suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Lunch dates were canceled. Group chats went silent. Then came the texts, always apologetic, always cowardly. "So sorry, babe, but Mom says we shouldn't be seen together right now. You know how business works. XO. Hey, Fee, this is awkward, but my dad does a lot of deals with Ashford Properties and you understand, right? Nothing personal, but I can't risk my family's relationship with yours. Good luck, though." 28 years of friendships, and every single one of them came with a price tag I was no longer worth. At Ashford Properties, where I'd worked in marketing for 3 years, colleagues avoided eye contact. The whispers followed me through every hallway. The corner office I'd earned was suddenly needed for restructuring. HR's email arrived on a Friday afternoon. "Your position is being evaluated. Please refrain from client-facing activities until further notice." They didn't fire me. They just made sure I knew I was worthless. Through all of it, one person kept reaching out. A lawyer named Margaret Chen. No, wait, Margaret Smith. She'd been my grandmother's attorney before Grandma passed 2 years ago. "Miss Ashford," her voicemail said, "there's a matter regarding your grandmother's estate that requires your attention. Please call at your earliest convenience." I saved the message, but didn't return the call. I was too busy drowning to notice the life raft being thrown my way. That night, I scrolled through Instagram and saw Derek at a rooftop party with all my former friends. My mother had commented, So proud of my son. Family is everything. The message was clear. I was no longer family. James found us an apartment in Brooklyn. It was nothing like the penthouse I'd grown up in. No doorman, no marble floors, no view of Central Park. Just a bright two-bedroom in a brownstone, with creaky hardwood floors and a tiny balcony that overlooked a community garden. "It's not much," he said, watching my face as I walked through the empty rooms, "but it's ours, no one else's." I started to cry. Not from disappointment, from relief. Here, my father's shadow couldn't reach. Here, I could breathe. James held me while I sobbed out years of pressure I hadn't known I was carrying. He didn't promise to fix everything or rescue me from my problems. He just stayed. I spent the next weeks sending out resumes to every marketing firm in the city. The rejections came fast, too fast. Somehow, everywhere I applied already knew about the Ashford situation. Doors slammed shut before I could even knock. "I'll figure something out," I told James over dinner. Takeout containers spread across our second-hand kitchen table. "I have to do this myself," he nodded. "I know, but I'm here if you need me." That night, I woke at 2 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. Through the cracked bedroom door, I saw him in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "The quarterly projections need adjustment before the board meeting. No, don't push it to Williams. I'll handle the technical review myself." I must have made a sound because he turned, saw me, and quickly said, "I'll call you back." "Work stuff," he said with a small smile. "Go back to sleep." I nodded and returned to bed, but I lay awake for hours, wondering when mechanics started having board meetings. 1 week before the wedding, my father appeared at our apartment. I hadn't seen him since I'd walked out of his office. Now he stood in our Brooklyn doorway, his Tom Ford suit as out of place as a diamond in a sandbox, looking at our modest living room like it might be contagious. "I'm here to make you an offer," he said, not bothering with greetings. James stood beside me, silent and watchful. My father pulled out a checkbook. $5 million. Cancel the wedding. Come home. We'll pretend this little rebellion never happened." I stared at the blank check in his hand. $5 million. More money than I could earn in a lifetime on my own. Enough to start fresh anywhere in the world. "No. 10 million. His pen hovered. "Final offer." "I'm not for sale, Dad." His face twisted into something ugly. "Then you're a fool. And when this marriage fails, because it will, don't come crawling back. You'll have nothing, no inheritance, no trust fund, no shares in the company, no Ashford name to protect you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You'll be nobody, just like him." He gestured at James with contempt, James who hadn't said a word, who stood with his hands loose at his sides and a strange, cold calm in his eyes. "Mr. Ashford," James said quietly, "I think you should leave." "Oh, the mechanic speaks," my father laughed. "Enjoy her while you can, son. When the shine wears off and she realizes what she's given up, she'll resent you for it." "I don't think she will." Something passed between them, a look I couldn't quite read. My father's smirk faltered for just a moment. Then he turned and walked out without another word. "He'll make the wedding hell," I whispered. James took my hand. "Let him try." Our wedding was supposed to be small. James and I had planned an intimate ceremony at a restaurant in Brooklyn. 50 guests, mostly colleagues from my marketing days who'd stayed loyal, and a few of James's friends from the garage. Simple. Meaningful. Ours. We arrived to find 250 extra guests already seated. They filled every corner of the restaurant, spilling out onto the patio, women in Chanel and Oscar de la Renta, men in bespoke suits worth more than our rent. My father's world, uninvited and unapologetic. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Derek scrolled through his phone, looking bored. And there, at the center of it all, stood my father in a three-piece Brioni suit, a glass of champagne in hand, smiling like he owned the place. Because in every way that mattered to him, he did. "Surprise, sweetheart." He kissed my cheek before I could pull away. "You didn't think I'd miss my only daughter's wedding, did you?" "What is this?" I demanded. "What did you do?" I promised you a wedding you'd remember. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Consider this my gift. I looked around at the sea of faces, Manhattan's elite, my father's business partners, society columnists with their phones ready, and realized what he'd done. He'd turned our intimate celebration into a spectacle, a stage, and he was about to be the star. James squeezed my hand. We can leave right now. Say the word. I looked at the guests, at my father's triumphant smile, at the altar we'd chosen together. No. I straightened my shoulders. We're getting married today. Whatever he's planning, we'll face it together. I had no idea how bad it was about to get. My father waited until the ceremony was complete. We'd exchanged vows, James's words simple and sincere, mine thick with emotion. The officiant pronounced us married. For one perfect moment, surrounded by the chaos my father had created, I was happy. Then came the clinking of glass. Richard Ashford rose from his seat, Dom Perignon in hand, and the room fell silent. 300 guests turned to watch him like spectators at an execution. A toast, he announced, his voice carrying across the restaurant. To my daughter and her husband. The pause before husband dripped with contempt. I built everything I have from nothing, he continued, pacing slowly toward the center of the room. Every dollar, every deal, every opportunity, earned through blood and sacrifice, and I dreamed that one day my daughter would marry someone worthy of that legacy. He stopped in front of our table, looking down at James like he was examining something unpleasant on his shoe. Instead, she chose this, a grease monkey from Queens, a parasite with nothing to offer but calloused hands and empty pockets. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed nervously. I saw phones rising, recording. So I'm here to make an announcement. My father's voice hardened into steel. From this moment forward, Fiona Ashford is no longer my daughter. She is hereby removed from my will, cut off from her trust fund, and stripped of any claim to Ashford properties. He turned to face the crowd, arms spread wide. Let this be a lesson. When you choose poverty over family, you get exactly what you deserve. He drained his champagne, set the glass on our table, and smiled. Congratulations, sweetheart. You're finally getting everything you asked for. The silence that followed was deafening. James didn't flinch. He rose slowly from his chair, straightening his tie, a simple navy blue, nothing designer, and faced my father with an expression I'd never seen before, calm, controlled, almost amused. Thank you for coming, Mr. Ashford, he said, his voice steady and clear. And thank you for your blessing. My father snorted. Blessing? I just told you you're getting nothing. I heard you. James stepped forward until they were face to face, and I want you to know we don't need it. You don't need it, Richard laughed, harsh and mocking. You own a garage worth less than my watch. You live in a shoebox apartment. What exactly do you have to offer my daughter? James smiled, a small, private smile that sent a chill down my spine and my father's. Something more important than money, Mr. Ashford. I have her. Somewhere in the crowd, an older man stood up, silver-haired, distinguished, wearing a suit that even I could tell was quietly expensive. He watched the exchange with sharp eyes and the hint of a smile. I'd seen him earlier among James's guests, but hadn't thought to ask who he was. My father glanced at the man, then back at James, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, maybe. The sense that he was missing something. Enjoy your poverty, my father spat. When she's tired of struggling, when she realizes what she's thrown away, and she will, don't say I didn't warn you. Real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, Mr. Ashford. James's voice dropped, meant only for us. But you'll understand that soon enough. My father laughed again, but it sounded hollow. He had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. My father had just finished his performance. Now it was my turn. I took James's hand and turned to face 300 people who expected me to crumble. The socialites in their designer gowns, the businessmen calculating my fall, the society reporters already crafting their headlines. They were all waiting for tears, for begging, for surrender. They didn't know me at all. My father believes money is everything, I said, my voice carrying across the sudden silence. He believes love is a transaction, family is a business arrangement, and people are either useful or worthless. I looked at my mother, who couldn't meet my eyes, at Derek still scrolling his phone, at the crowd of strangers who'd come to watch my humiliation like it was entertainment. I used to believe it too. I spent 28 years trying to be valuable in his eyes, the right school, the right degree, the right clothes, the right smile. And you know what I got? Adequate. Acceptable. Never good enough. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Today, I chose something different. I chose to be loved for who I am, not what I'm worth. I squeezed James's hand. And if that cost me everything I was supposed to inherit, then it wasn't mine to begin with. I turned to the remaining guests, some looking uncomfortable, others moved. If anyone here came to watch a tragedy, I'm sorry to disappoint you. This is a celebration. If you want to leave, the door is right there. But if you want to stay and actually celebrate with us, I smiled. Welcome to our wedding. About 30 people gathered their things and left, but nearly 270 stayed, including some of my father's own guests. He hadn't expected that. My father stormed out with my mother and Derek trailing behind. The door hadn't even closed before the atmosphere shifted. Like a storm passing, the air in the room suddenly felt lighter. Someone started clapping, a genuine, warm applause that spread through the crowd. The DJ, who'd been frozen in shock, finally started the music. And just like that, our wedding became ours again. The cake came from a local bakery in Brooklyn, 3 tiers of vanilla buttercream that tasted better than any $5,000 designer creation I'd had at society weddings. James and I cut it together, laughing when the frosting smeared his nose. "Any regrets?" he asked as we swayed together on the dance floor, my head resting on his chest. "Not a single one." "Even after all that?" I pulled back to look at him, this man who'd stood beside me while my father tried to tear us apart, who'd never raised his voice or lost his composure. "Especially after all that." I touched his face. "You didn't even flinch." Something passed behind his eyes. A shadow, a secret. "I've faced worse than your father." "What does that mean?" He kissed my forehead instead of answering. "Someday, I'll tell you everything. I promise." The night ended with dancing and laughter, and a feeling of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Our guests, the real ones, the ones who stayed, surrounded us with genuine joy. But as James held me close during the last dance, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling me. The mysterious older man from earlier had congratulated James with a knowing handshake before leaving. James's late-night phone calls about board meetings. Whoever my husband really was, I had a feeling I was only seeing the surface. The real story was yet to come. Now, before I continue, I want to pause here and talk to you directly. If you've ever felt like your family didn't see your true value, type "same" in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to hear your story. Hit that like button if you think I made the right choice standing up for myself. And if you haven't subscribed yet, trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. Because the twist, you won't see it coming. Let me continue. The honeymoon period lasted about 6 weeks. Not the romance. James and I were happier than ever, learning how to build a life together in our Brooklyn apartment. No, what ended was my hope of finding work. I'd applied to 43 marketing positions across the city, entry-level, mid-level, anything that would use my MBA and 3 years of experience. Every single application came back rejected, most without even an interview. Word traveled fast in Manhattan. The Ashford name, which once opened doors, now slammed them shut. Nobody wanted to risk offending Richard Ashford by hiring his disowned daughter. "Maybe I should look outside the city," I said one night, staring at my laptop screen. Another rejection email. Another door closed. James was quiet, standing by the window. "Or maybe you shouldn't work for anyone else." "I can't exactly start my own company right now. I have maybe $3,000 to my name." "Sometimes that's enough." I laughed bitterly. "In what world?" He didn't answer, just watched me with those calm brown eyes that I was beginning to realize hid more than he showed. Our savings dwindled. I insisted on paying half the bills. Some stubborn part of me needed to prove I wasn't just a kept woman. James never complained, never pushed, never offered to simply take care of everything. He respected my pride even when it made things harder. But at 3 a.m., when I couldn't sleep, the doubt crept in. What if my father was right? What if I couldn't survive without the Ashford name? What if I'd given up everything for a man I was only beginning to know? James found me on the balcony one night, wrapped in a blanket, crying silently at the city lights. "Tell me what you need," he whispered. "I don't know anymore." 3 months after the wedding, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I almost didn't answer, but some desperate part of me still hoped. "Darling." Her voice was honey smooth, the way it got when she wanted something. "How are you? We've been so worried." "Have you?" "Of course. You're still my daughter, no matter what your father says." A strategic pause. "You know, he hasn't formally changed the will yet. There's still time if you wanted to. Reconsider." "Reconsider my marriage." "Reconsider your choices. You've made your point, Fiona. We all understand you wanted independence, but surely by now you've realized that man can't give you the life you deserve." I thought about James making me coffee every morning, remembering exactly how I liked it. About the way he held me when the rejection emails piled up. About his steady faith in me when I had none in myself. "I think he already has," she sighed. "You're killing me, Fiona. Every day you stay with him is another day you're throwing away your future." The next attack came from Derek's Instagram, a photo from some rooftop party. My former friends, champagne, the Manhattan skyline. Caption: "Some people choose love over luxury. Hope they're enjoying their freedom. #poverty is romantic." The comments were brutal, laughing emojis. Inside jokes I used to be part of. My mother had liked the post. James came home that evening to find me staring at the screen, tears tracking down my cheeks. He took the phone gently from my hands and looked at the post. For a moment, his jaw tightened, the first real anger I'd seen from him. "They'll rewrite this story soon," he said quietly. "I promise you." "How can you be so sure?" He kissed my forehead instead of answering. 4 months after my wedding, the letter arrived. Heavy cream paper, Ashford Properties letterhead, the law firm's seal embossed in gold. "Dear Ms. Ashford Carter, this letter serves as formal notification that Richard Ashford has executed amendments to his last will and testament. Per these amendments, you have been permanently removed as a beneficiary. Your previous designation to receive 20% of Ashford Properties holdings, estimated current value $200 million, has been reallocated. Additionally, trust account number 47,891, established in your name, has been dissolved per trustee authority. These changes are final and irrevocable. Regards." $200 million, gone with a signature. I sat on our tiny balcony as the sun set over Brooklyn, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to black. For 28 years, I'd been promised that money. I'd never wanted it, not really, but knowing it was there had been a safety net I never realized I was standing on. Now the net was gone, and I was in free fall. James found me there hours later, the letter crumpled in my hands, my face swollen from crying. "I saw the envelope," he said, sitting beside me. "I'm sorry." "I don't care about the money." I laughed bitterly. That's the irony. I never cared about the money, but knowing he could just erase me like that, like I never existed. James was quiet for a long moment. "I have something to tell you," he said finally. "Something I've been waiting for the right time to share." He took my hand. "But not yet. In 3 months, there's an event. I need you to trust me until then." "What kind of event?" "The kind that will change everything." He met my eyes. "Can you wait that long?" I didn't understand, but I trusted him. "Yes." The next day I finally returned Margaret Smith's call. Her office was in a brownstone on the Upper West Side, old money quiet, with mahogany bookshelves and leather chairs that had seen decades of confidential conversations. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Carter." She smiled warmly, emphasizing my married name in a way that felt deliberate. "Your grandmother would be very proud of you." Hearing Grandma Maggie mentioned made my throat tight. She'd died 2 years ago, the only person in my family who'd ever truly seen me. "You said there was something about her estate?" Margaret nodded, sliding a folder across her desk. Before she passed, Margaret Thornton established a separate trust, independent of anything controlled by your father. She instructed me to inform you of it only after you married someone of your own choosing, without your father's approval. I stared at her. What? She knew, Fiona. She knew exactly what kind of man her son-in-law was, and she wanted to ensure you had options. Margaret opened the folder. The trust contains $500,000 in diversified assets. It became yours the day you married James Carter. $500,000, my grandmother's final gift. There was a letter inside, written in her familiar, elegant script. My darling Fiona, if you're reading this, it means you finally chose your own path. I am so proud of you. Your grandfather and I built our life on love, not money. We had nothing when we started, and everything when we ended, because we had each other. This money is not a fortune, but it's freedom. Use it to build the life you want. Never let anyone tell you what you're worth. All my love, Grandma Maggie, I cried in that office for 20 minutes. For the first time in months, they were tears of hope. 5 months after my wedding, I launched Thornton Creative, named after my grandmother's maiden name, a deliberate choice to separate myself from the Ashford legacy. I rented a small office in a co-working space in Soho, designed my own logo, and reached out to every small business owner I'd ever met who wasn't connected to my father's world. The first client was a coffee shop in Brooklyn, the same one where I'd met James. They needed help with their social media presence, and I charged them half my normal rate just to build my portfolio. The second client was a vintage bookstore in the Village, then a family-owned restaurant in Queens, then a tech startup in Jersey City. Word spread, not through Manhattan's elite networks, but through the real New York, people who judged work by results, not family names. Within 2 months, I had more clients than I could handle alone. I was building something that was mine. I'm proud of you, James said one evening, watching me work on a campaign from our kitchen table. I couldn't have done it without Grandma's trust fund, or without you believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. He smiled that quiet smile. You would have found a way. That week, I received an email that made me freeze. Subject: Partnership Inquiry. From marketing@nexusi.com. Dear Ms. Thornton, Nexus AI Technologies is interested in discussing a potential marketing partnership with your firm. We are impressed by your work with emerging businesses and believe your approach aligns with our brand values. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Nexus AI Marketing Division. I'd never heard of Nexus AI, but a quick Google search showed they were one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. Strange that they'd found my tiny firm. Very strange indeed. I didn't connect the dots immediately. But the business news that month was full of one story. Nexus AI Technologies was looking for real estate partners to build a massive data center on the East Coast. The deal was worth $50 million, and every developer in New York was scrambling for it, including, it turned out, my father. Derek mentioned it on Instagram, of course. A photo of Richard shaking hands with someone at a business conference. Caption: Dad closing in on the biggest deal of the decade. Ashford Properties plus Nexus AI equals fire. I scrolled past it without much thought. But a few days later, James came home with a curious look on his face. Did you see the news about Nexus AI? The data center thing? Yeah, everyone's talking about it. I looked up from my laptop. Why? No reason. But he was smiling, that small, private smile I still couldn't decode. Just interesting that your father wants it so badly. Everything's a competition with him. He probably doesn't even need the money. He just wants to win. James sat beside me on the couch. What would you say if I told you he's not going to? Win? How do you know? Because I know who runs Nexus AI. Something cold trickled down my spine. James, he took my hand. There's a gala next month, the Tech Charity Foundation event at the Met. Nexus AI is the main sponsor and... He paused. Their CEO is making a rare public appearance. Okay, I want you to come with me. To a tech gala? James, I don't know anyone in that world. He lifted my hand and kissed it. You know me. The way he said it, like it meant more than I understood, made my heart skip. What aren't you telling me? Everything. And soon, I promise. 2 weeks before the gala, James sat me down. It was Sunday morning. He'd made pancakes again, our weekend tradition now, and the apartment smelled like maple syrup and coffee. But his face was serious in a way I'd rarely seen. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to let me finish before you react." My stomach tightened. "Okay." "The auto shop is real. I do own Carter's custom garage, and I do fix cars there when I can." He took a breath. "But it's not what I do for a living. It's a hobby, a way to stay grounded." "Stay grounded from what?" "From the other part of my life." He met my eyes. "I work in tech, Fiona. I'm not just a mechanic, I'm significantly involved in the industry." I stared at him. What does significantly involved mean? "It means I'm not poor, not even close." He ran a hand through his hair. Nervous, I realized. I'd never seen him nervous. "I've been hiding the truth because I needed to know that someone could love me for who I am, not for what I have." "James, you're scaring me. Just tell me." "Not yet. Not completely. I want you to see it for yourself, at the gala." He pulled something from his pocket, a thick envelope with elegant calligraphy. "This is your invitation. VIP access, my guest." I took the envelope. Inside was a heavy cream card, gold embossed. "The Tech Charity Foundation cordially invites you to our annual gala guest of honor, James Carter." Guest of honor. "James." My voice came out as a whisper. "Who are you?" He took my face in his hands, his eyes more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. "I'm the man who loves you. Everything else is just details." The 2 weeks before the gala felt like living in a dream I couldn't quite wake from. I Googled Nexus AI CEO obsessively. The search results were maddeningly vague. The company was famous for its privacy, no photos of leadership, no public statements, just a reputation for brilliant innovation and a mysterious founder who avoided the spotlight. Forbes had run a piece 6 months ago. "The billionaire nobody's seen, inside the world of Nexus AI's phantom founder." No name, no face, just speculation about a young tech genius who'd built a $4 billion empire while staying completely invisible. I thought about James, his late-night phone calls about board meetings, the technical jargon I'd overheard, the casual stacks of cash, the mysterious older man at our wedding who'd looked at James with something like respect or deference. The pieces were all there. I'd just been too close to see the picture. The night before the gala, James presented me with a dress, a Valentino, black and elegant, probably worth more than our monthly rent. I didn't ask how much it cost. I was beginning to understand that money wasn't a concern for him, had never been. "Are you angry?" he asked quietly. "That I didn't tell you sooner?" I looked at this man, my husband, who I was only now beginning to truly know. "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted. "You lied to me." "I withheld information to protect something important. There's a difference." "Is there?" He nodded. "Tomorrow you'll understand everything, and then you can decide how you feel." He kissed my forehead. "Whatever you decide, I won't blame you." I barely slept that night. In a few hours, I would walk into a world I thought I'd left behind, and discover that my husband wasn't the struggling mechanic my father had mocked. He was something else entirely. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling of the Great Hall like frozen starbursts. 500 of the most powerful people in technology, finance, and media mingled beneath Renaissance masterpieces, champagne flutes catching the light. The women wore couture, the men wore power like a second skin, and everyone was watching us. I walked in on James's arm, my black Valentino suddenly feeling inadequate against the sea of designer gowns, but James moved through the crowd like he owned it, nodding to people who nodded back with deference I couldn't explain. "James Carter," a silver-haired man said, shaking his hand warmly. "Looking forward to the announcement." "Senator Mitchell," James replied. "Thank you for coming." Senator. James knew senators. We'd barely made it to the bar when I spotted them. My father, my mother, and Derek, standing near the auction displays, working the room with practiced smiles. Richard's eyes swept the crowd constantly, searching for someone. Then they landed on me. His face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, recognition, contempt. He started walking toward us, my mother hurrying to keep up. "Fiona!" He stopped a few feet away, looking at James with a predator's smile. What a surprise. I didn't realize they let the help into these events. James said nothing, just watched him with that unsettling calm. "Don't tell me you crashed the party." Richard laughed, looking around for an audience. "Security should really do a better job of screening for—" Mr. Ashford. A woman in a headset appeared at his elbow. "The CEO of Nexus AI will be speaking in 15 minutes. You requested a seat at the sponsor table?" "Yes, yes." He waved her off, still smirking at James. "I have a very important meeting after his speech." If only he knew. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the great hall as the massive screens flickered to life. The Nexus AI logo, a sleek silver N intertwined with a circuit pattern, appeared, followed by sweeping footage of their technology, self-driving systems, medical AI, climate modeling. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, her voice echoing through the hall, "tonight marks a historic moment. For the first time ever, the founder and CEO of Nexus AI Technologies will address the public in person." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father leaned forward in his seat, adjusting his tie. I saw him mouth something to my mother, probably strategizing about his approach after the speech. "This company has revolutionized artificial intelligence across every sector. Their innovations have changed how we live, work, and connect. And the mind behind it all has, until now, remained private." James squeezed my hand. "Are you ready?" "For what?" He smiled. Not his small, private smile, but something brighter, something free. "For everything to change." The MC's voice swelled. "Please welcome the CEO and founder of Nexus AI Technologies, valued at $4.7 billion and named by Forbes as one of the most influential people in tech." James let go of my hand. "James Carter!" The room erupted in applause. My father's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. My mother's mouth fell open, and James, my James, the mechanic from Queens, the man my father had called trash, walked onto that stage like he'd been born there. The screens behind him lit up with his name, his face, his title. James Carter, CEO and founder. Nexus AI Technologies. I looked at my father. His face had gone white. Completely, utterly white. And for the first time in my life, I saw Richard Ashford at a loss for words. James spoke for 20 minutes. He talked about innovation, responsibility, and the future of technology. He was brilliant, articulate, passionate, and magnetic in a way I'd only glimpsed in private moments. The audience hung on every word. I barely heard any of it. I was too busy watching my father. Richard Ashford sat frozen in his seat, staring at the stage like he was watching a ghost. The color had drained from his face and never returned. My mother kept touching his arm, whispering urgently, but he didn't respond. Derek had stopped pretending to be bored and was now openly gaping. When James finished his speech, the standing ovation was thunderous. 500 of the most powerful people in America were on their feet, applauding the man my father had called a grease monkey. James found my eyes in the crowd and smiled. Just for me. The reception afterward was chaos. Everyone wanted to meet the mysterious CEO who'd finally emerged. Investors, politicians, media moguls, they swarmed him like moths to flame. But James had one destination first. He walked directly to where my father still sat, seemingly unable to stand. I followed, my heart pounding. "Mr. Ashford." James's voice was pleasant, professional. "I believe you wanted to discuss a business partnership." My father looked up. His mouth opened and closed several times. "You," his voice came out strangled, "you're the CEO of the company you've been pursuing for 2 years." James pulled out a business card. Simple, elegant, undeniable. "James Carter, Nexus AI. Perhaps you've heard of us." Richard's hands shook as he took the card. Forbes later confirmed what everyone in that room was calculating. James Carter was worth $4.7 billion. My husband was richer than my father by a factor of 2. The mechanic was a billionaire. My father recovered faster than I expected. Within seconds, his shock transformed into a businessman's smile, the same one he used when closing deals, when pretending to like people he'd later destroy. James. He stood, extending his hand like they were old friends. I had no idea. This is wonderful news. I always told Fiona she had excellent taste. The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. James didn't take his hand. You told me I was trash, Mr. Ashford. His voice remained perfectly pleasant. You called me a parasite, a grease monkey. You said I had nothing to offer your daughter. You have to understand, I didn't know. Whether I fixed cars or ran companies, I was the same person. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my value. James finally took the extended hand, but not to shake it. He pressed his own business card into my father's palm, which says more about you than it does about me. Around us, people were watching, listening, recording on their phones. My father's smile strained. Let's discuss this privately. The data center deal. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. I've already made my decision about that. James's voice carried just enough to be heard by the nearby crowd. Nexus A, I will not be partnering with Ashford Properties. What? Why? Because I don't do business with people who treat their families like assets to be traded. James stepped back, sliding his arm around my waist. Your daughter chose love over money. You punished her for it. I don't reward that kind of behavior. The whispers spread like wildfire. By morning, this story would be on every business page in America. Richard Ashford had just lost the biggest deal of his career to his own son-in-law. Okay, I need to stop here for a second. Did any of you see that coming? Be honest. Type shocked if you didn't, or called it if you did. I want to know. And if you've ever had someone underestimate you based on appearances, you're not alone. That's the lesson, isn't it? Never judge a book by its cover. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications. Because what happened next? That's where it gets really good. Back to the story. The fallout was immediate and merciless. By midnight, the video from our wedding, my father's entire toast calling James trash, was everywhere. Someone had finally posted it, and now it had context. The man Richard Ashford had publicly humiliated was worth $4.7 billion. The headlines wrote themselves. Real estate tycoon mocks son-in-law at wedding. Turns out he's a tech billionaire. Ashford Properties, CEO, learns expensive lesson about judging books by covers. The $50 million mistake. How one father's pride cost his company everything. Within a week, two of my father's other business partners announced they were reviewing their arrangements. One major investor pulled out of a development project, citing concerns about judgment and leadership. The social media comments were brutal. Every business forum, every society blog, every corner of the internet was laughing at Richard Ashford. But the sweetest twist came from Derek. My brother, my Instagram-mocking, champagne-toasting brother, showed up at our apartment 3 days after the gala. He actually rang the doorbell like a civilized person. James! He shifted uncomfortably in our living room. Look, I wanted to apologize for the things I said. The Instagram posts. It was immature, and You wanted to apologize, James said calmly. Or you wanted access. Derek's face reddened. Come on, man. We're family now. Think about the partnerships we could create. Ashford Properties and Nexus AI, working together. The same Ashford Properties that disowned my wife? James stood. The same family that cut her off and mocked her for marrying me? He opened our front door. You made your choice 6 months ago, Derek. We're not family. We're just people who share a relative. The door closed. Derek left. Some people only apologize when they want something. James understood that better than anyone. My mother called 3 times before I answered. Fiona, darling. Her voice was thick with tears. Real or manufactured, I couldn't tell anymore. You have to understand. I always supported you. I wanted to speak up at the wedding, but your father, you know how he is. You didn't say a word, Mom. I was afraid. You know what he's like when he's angry. I had to protect myself. You had to protect yourself. I let the words hang. What about protecting me? Silence. I have something, I said quietly. Something Grandma's lawyer gave me. A letter that was supposed to stay sealed. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Grandma's lawyer found an email in the estate files, Mom, an email you sent to Dad 2 days before my wedding. I pulled up the screenshot on my phone. the one Margaret Smith had reluctantly shared when I asked about family communications around that time. You wrote, "Richard is right. She needs to learn. Let her struggle for a few months without money. She'll come crawling back and marry Harrison like she should have." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. That was taken out of context. Was it? My voice was steady now. You didn't defend me, Mom. You helped plan my punishment. You stood there while Dad humiliated me, and you were part of it the whole time. Fiona, I'm not angry. And I realized, saying it, that it was true. I'm just done. If you want to be part of my life, really part of it, you'll have to earn it. Through actions, not words. What does that mean? It means I'll call you when I'm ready. Please don't call me again until then. I hung up before she could respond. Some boundaries need to be built with silence. My father came alone. No driver, no entourage, no Tom Ford armor. Just a tired man in wrinkled clothes standing in our Brooklyn doorway with something I'd never seen before on his face. Humility. May I come in? I stepped aside. James stood by the window, watching but not interfering. My father looked around our modest apartment. The second-hand furniture, the small kitchen, the photos from our wedding on the wall. And for once, he didn't seem to be calculating its value. I've lost 3 partnerships this week, he said quietly. The data center deal is dead. The board is discussing whether to remove me as CEO of my own company. He laughed bitterly. Turns out public humiliation has consequences. I'm sorry about your business problems. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. He finally met my eyes. I was wrong, Fiona. About James. About you. About what matters. I'd waited my whole life to hear those words. Now that they came, I felt tired. I don't need your apology, Dad. Then what do you need? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I need you to understand that I'm happy. Not because my husband turned out to be rich. I was happy before I knew. I'm happy because I'm respected, supported, loved for who I am. I stepped closer. Can you understand that? Something shifted in his face. Maybe not full understanding. Maybe that was too much to ask. But something. I'm trying. Then try harder. I put my hand on his arm. I'm willing to have you in my life, Dad, but not as someone who controls me, not as someone who judges my worth by my husband's bank account, as my father. Just that. He nodded slowly. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. 1 year after our wedding, Thornton Creative had 15 employees. My little marketing firm had grown into something real, not because of James's money or connections, but because of referrals from satisfied clients and a reputation I'd built one project at a time. We'd just signed our biggest contract yet, a year-long campaign for a Fortune 500 company who'd found us through word of mouth. James still went to the garage on weekends. He said it kept him grounded, reminded him of who he was before the billions. Sometimes I joined him, handing him wrenches and learning the names of engine parts. My father was still learning too. Our relationship wasn't healed, might never be fully, but he was trying. He'd started therapy, according to my mother. He'd asked me to coffee twice, and both times he'd asked questions about my life instead of talking about himself. Progress, not perfection. That Christmas, we celebrated at James's mother's house in Connecticut, a cozy colonial with a garden and real laughter echoing off the walls. No designer decorations or catered meals, just family. Any regrets? James asked, pulling me close as snow fell outside the window. I thought about the penthouse I'd lost, the trust fund that vanished, the $200 million I'd never see. Then I thought about building something with my own hands, about being loved for who I was, about my grandmother's words, never let anyone tell you what you're worth. Not a single one. He kissed me, and the snow kept falling, and somewhere in Manhattan, my father was probably still tallying his losses. But I'd stopped counting a long time ago. Real wealth, I'd learned, isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the peace you feel when you finally stop trying to be who everyone else wants you to be, and just become yourself. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. First, don't let anyone define your worth by money, not even family, especially not family. Second, actions speak louder than words. When people show you who they are, believe them. And when they suddenly change after learning your value, be skeptical. Third, true love doesn't ask you to abandon who you are. It gives you room to grow into who you're meant to be. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on the bell so you never miss another story. Check the description for more stories like this. Some twists are even wilder than mine. And drop a comment. Should I have forgiven my father completely? I read every single one. See you in the next one.